Uhuru.
Uhuru.
Uhuru,
We are
Mariah.
back.
Yes, we are. What is it? Season 3 finale on January
Wow.
2026. Look at that. I can't believe it's already been 3 seasons of One Africa Worldview nonstop since last year.
Wow. Non-stop. It is Monday. You know what time it is. So go ahead. Come on in. Come on in. As we say, we have a show for you today. This is our season finale. You heard her. So we are live. We are here. Go ahead and like, share, subscribe. Come on in.
That's right. And, drop some comments. Let us know where you're tuning in from. Say Uhuru. We already got Philip Belair on with us. Uhuru, comrade. We are live. Yeah, we got a really hot topic ready for y'all. Y'all already see the title, right? White left attacks Black power again. Y'all already see the thumbnail. We got some hot fire guests for you. Both of them have been on the show before, I think back in season 1, and I think we've had Matsemela again on season 2, and season 3, I believe. Either way, we got some heavy hitter guests on and ready to give you a really great show and answer some really important questions that have come up in the world. Every time you see the news, something's popping off. Some crazy stuff is happening all over the cities in the US and Africa. And, as you know, we're here on One Africa Worldview to give it that African Internationalist analysis. So y'all already know the deal. But if you're ready, comrade Mariah.
Let's do it. Let's do it.
Uhuru, I am Soliana, your managing editor for the Burning Spear newspaper, which is the longest running Black Power newspaper.
Yeah, you heard. I'm Dr. Mariah, promotions coordinator for Black Power 96.3 FM radio based in St. Petersburg, Florida, but available worldwide through your Black Power 96 mobile app. Our show airs on Black Power 96 radio every Thursday at 2 p.m. Eastern.
That's right. And you are now tuned into the One Africa Worldview podcast that brings you African internationalist analysis on the day's top headlines, dynamic discussions and presentations from anti-colonial organizers and experts across the globe, and a to what end to our struggle against colonialism with real-time ways on how to engage and get involved. This is, like we said, our season 3 finale episode, so we have to come on strong.
As we always do with a roundtable discussion this time, planned for all our viewers, listeners, and supporters here regarding the latest assault on the Black liberation movement by the opportunist white left, y'all. In the online publication, the Jacobin, run by the Democratic Socialists of America, or the DSA, they recently published an article titled Colonial Plunder Didn't Create Capitalism. And it was an unveiled assault on the work of Chairman Omali Yeshitela and the African People's Socialist Party, which came to the conclusion that capitalism wouldn't exist if not for the colonization of Africa.
That's exactly right. And the white left is taking the mask off, right? The wolf in sheep's clothing is getting exposed, and we're going to get into that. But first, we're going to have an abbreviated Whirlwind Weekly update looking at what has transpired in Minneapolis, Minnesota, with the killing of Renee Good by ICE agents. Now, this marks a total of 36 deaths at the hands of ICE, whether by shooting or in detention centers, which is actually a less reported and likely inaccurate reality.
Wow. When it comes to this, it's just, we can say that we can go back to January 7th of this year. We're seeing that the 37-year-old Renee Good is the name there, and she was shot 3 times and fatally struck by the ICE agent, nonetheless, while sitting in her car, y'all. And Renee was a white woman, and formerly a citizen of the U.S. settler colony. And of course, U.S. President Donald John Trump has defended this whole matter, justifying ICE with the same old self-defense story, despite the in broad daylight footage that really contradicts this in pure reality, y'all. But this murder sparked outrage and this whole mass protest throughout Minnesota and abroad there and other states as well. And while we condemn the murder of Renee Good, we also acknowledge how this specific murder served as some colonizers' final straw.
Right. And it's not lost on us how, now that a white woman has become a victim of the colonial state, people who would have normally justified people would have normally justified the rounding up of African, Mexican, and indigenous people can see the contradiction with ICE, right? But even the analysis we're seeing from the media, government officials, and individuals alike say, quote unquote, ICE is too forceful, right? Which really just translates to, ICE is okay as long as it doesn't attack one of us, right? And this is never mind the fact that Keith Porter, who was actually a 43-year-old African man in Los Angeles, California, he was shot and killed on New Year's Day by an off-duty ICE agent. And we didn't hear much about this at all, not even a whiff in the media about this murder. And the first murder actually of ICE during an apprehension like this was back in September, shortly after they were deployed, right? And so far there have been 36 reported deaths at the hands of ICE overall. And what Renee's murder really further reveals is that under the colonial mode of production, the killing of colonized people is a normal feature of the system. It's what keeps the system running. But Renee's death, was an anomaly, right? It became the sort of latest catalyst for white people, colonizers, to come out against the colonial state and declare such things like fascism.
Yeah, exactly, comrade. And this whole disregard for the life of the colonizers is exemplified in this reaction surrounding that murder of Renee Good, actually. And we just also keep seeing that she was a U.S. citizen, which disregards those who have no formal citizenship on stolen indigenous land, actually. And it implies that there's a historical basis and justification for the murder of colonized peoples by the colonial state, but not for a white woman and the colonizer population as a whole.
Right. And, in the wake of this, protests erupted across Minneapolis, with at least 1,000 more nationwide protests that had been planned for just this past weekend alone. Places like Washington, D.C. and Chicago and just other major cities where Trump has actually sent National Guard troops into were among the places that really carried out these protests. But, like we mentioned in last week's episode, we must go beyond protests, right? That's important to show that you are actually against what the government's doing, but you have to also move, really mobilize the people within that protest and move to build for power in our own hands, as we always say.
Yeah, and as you say, power in our own hands. And we know that the Uhuru Solidarity Movement is out on the ground in Minneapolis, Minnesota, organizing other white people to just join in this leadership of the African working class, so the colonizer population is able to unite with the Black liberation movement in our pursuit to destroy the whole colonial mode of production, which is the social system that's responsible for Renee Good's murder here. And you can visit the uhurusolidarity.org to get more info and to get involved. That's uhurusolidarity.org, y'all.
Yeah, thank you so much for that information, because we do definitely have a whole solidarity organization that's working under the leadership of the African People's Socialist Party, organizing in the white community and really, giving leadership to these questions as well, right? So Speaking of white people uniting with the leadership of the African working class, we can shift gears to the primary objective portion of today's episode. As mentioned, the murder of Renee Good has been very revealing in and of itself, but the white left, continues to expose themselves as enemies of the African Revolution, especially in this recent article that's been published online by the DSA-operated Jacobin magazine website. Now, this is not a new contradiction, right? And the understandings that we saw in this article are reactionary. They're debunked. This is a question that's been resolved and answered. But still, the DSA, which aims to posture itself as the progressive alternative to the typical colonial ruling parties, unleashes this attack in an era of intensified and lethal colonial aggression against African, Indigenous, Palestinian, and just really all colonized people across the globe. And so in this article, which they titled, very sensationalistic type headline, says, colonial plunder didn't create capitalism, right? It reasserts the colonizers' depiction of the colonization of Africa and the enslavement of Africans, as well as the slaughter and, real almost decimation of the indigenous people and the colonization of the Americas as a footnote for Europe's thrust into modern history, right? It almost teeters on this idea of like Europe is what it is because there has to be some genius behind it, right? It's not colonialism. And if this is the conclusion that one must come to, it sort of presupposes that colonialism would be necessary for the pursuit of socialist aims, right? And it's a conclusion that white socialists did in fact come to.
Yeah, like the white left have long agreed to this socialist colonialism and nationalist socialism, also known as Nazism, which the white left claims to actually oppose, y'all. We want to get into that whole discussion further here with our guests, and we have on with us Comrade Dr. Matsemela Odom, Africana Studies Professor and Director of Cadre Development for the African People's Socialist Party, and Yejide Orunmila, President of the African National Women's Organization. So we want to welcome you, comrades, to the show here, and thank you for joining us to talk about this latest attack by the white left in the form of the DSA. So first, let's open it up with your initial thoughts. What are you thinking when you're seeing these headlines?
I'm thinking even more when I read the article, and I'm just like, what is he talking about? Why is he even talking about it? The he that we're referring to is Vivek Chibber, if I'm saying it correctly. He's laying out points like capitalism was not created as a result of colonialism, and put forth the same Marxist points that capitalism, innately developed inside Europe. And from there, because of Europe's genius, it was able to spread across the world and become a social system. It completely acknowledges colonialism, but it does not is saying that colonialism had no hand in actually maintaining the system of capitalism, which Marxists, for the most part, believe is a natural progression between, feudalism and, now. So it's completely, it's like, when people are on social media and they just do, rage baiting. I feel like this article is a rage bait. I feel like it's saying a lot of sensational things, making very sensational claims. And even though, like you said, Soliana, they have been debunked, we have been, Chairman Omali Yeshitela has been theorizing around this for, over 50 years. We have come to the conclusion, we resolved it. And, I think that, to your point that this is an attack on the African Revolution is very clear, because he's trying to basically eliminate the central character, the central pieces of the social system, African people, other colonized people whose land have been colonized, who have been subjects, and not a very clean way. I think that these sub points are made in a clinical way, where they can kind of, wash over the violence wash over the rapes, wash over the taking of resources and what that entails, the imposition of colonialism in the colonies and what that looks like for the eradication and contribution to genocide. Those are my initial thoughts. Uhuru.
Uhuru. No, yeah, thank you so much. And I felt the same way. And, Dr. Matsemela, we were just talking about, what our initial thoughts were when we first saw the headline of the Jacobin article that, has caused a lot of discourse on social media. They just gave our thoughts, but, it's titled Colonial Plunder Didn't Create Capitalism. And we just were wondering what you first thought when you saw that headline yourself.
Of course, I felt that it was more of the same, but also felt that it was without a doubt, a white left response to the uptick of anti-colonial activity of African people and people around the world. So when I say more of the same, I think we have to look at things such as Stuttgart, Germany, socialist conference in 1908, in which, and we'll probably talk about it, but in which, elements of the socialist movement came together in support of colonialism, and even very backwards ideas around African and other colonized people, in which they argued that if that sort of the colonial plan allow for them to create the socialist world that they want, and then through that they can serve as sort of custodians to usher African other colonized people into modernity. So I was a struggle waged even before the rise of organized socialism here within the United States. I'm not an expert on the works of people like Martin Delany and Frederick Douglass and others, but even when you go back to the abolition, there was similar sort of struggles. That you'd say one is sort of a materialist struggle of African people to be free and to be self-governing, and the other struggle against what Robert Sobukwe eventually in South Africa eventually termed the white who like us, right? But in the 1840s and 1850s, people like Martin Delany and Frederick Douglass waged struggles against white people who believe, because at the end, who believe essentially in sort of reformist positions towards the social movement then, and that caused Martin Delany to argue that even that with their what he calls anti-slavery friends, which sounds a lot like African held the same position in society, which was a mere secondary position. And essentially what was happening was that they want African labor in these social movements because of the fact that they know that they can't achieve any advance in those social movements without the work of African people and other people. But the thing is, they want us to do their bidding, right? They don't want us to struggle on our own terms. And that's what I imagine. So, the Jacobin is associated with the DSA. The DSA is filled with all sorts of Africans, some just coming into political life, some committed. But I'd imagine that sort of that position, first and foremost, has gripped not only African people but other people looking to overturn this social system, and them pushing back against that. I mean, it's not me just making up stuff. The evidence is, they have this conference. The conference is called Socialism, or the Socialism Conference. They have it every year. and multiple years we have applied for the Socialism Conference, and they have rejected us being part of that conference. But then at the same time, they'll have panels on questions of race, class, and the question, the national question, and how it relates to these things. But the thing is, they want to be at the center of the now putting the social forward, because the thing about African internationalism is like trying to theoretically solve a question that may be resolved in the future. We have these questions and things of that sort, so they can't really contend with that. So that's my clear take. I mean, I think it's a very clear assault against African internationalism, against the leadership of Chairman, but then also, like I said, a response to the uptick of anti-colonial struggle over me. I think we have to look at it in the terms in which people, probably even within their own sort of tendency, are saying, "Hey, how come we aren't doing more for the alliance of the Sahelian states, and what's our position on Sudan and things like that?" So instead, what they want is a socialist movement that saves capitalism, and the only way through which you can define that is national socialism, because the other alternative to it is internationalism, right? So and national socialism, we know what that is. And I mean, like I said, I mean, you take away the final solution and all that stuff, but you look at 10 years of the National Socialist Workers' Party in Germany, and it's basically the same sort of concept, create a socialist republic for white workers.
Right. Thank you so much for that answer, Dr. Matsemela and Yejide. And I appreciate, Matsemela, that you definitely included how this particular question has been dealt with as early as the 1800s, even maybe before that. And, the party has really come to the fore during during the end of the Black Revolution of the 60s, and really put clarity to this question of like, what is the system that we live under, and the party has become the leading voice within that. And this kind of brings me to my next question. You guys have already touched on it. What about the fact that they didn't mention Chairman Omali Yeshitela at all in this article, right? The author of African Internationalism by name. They sort of insinuate that it's some emerging theoretical conclusion from some vague source that, either shouldn't be taken seriously, or it's the sort of trendy leftist idea. That's one of the words that they actually use in the article. But what is that? Why is that significant? And why do you think, Chairman wasn't mentioned at all? What does that say about, where Jacobin stands, and the DSA by extension? And either of you could take a stab at this.
It's a continuation of what Matsemela was talking about, this ownership over the question of socialism, and the debunking of their so-called debunking of like African internationalist theory in different ways, or just to set, like, Chairman says it in one of his works. He says that African people were the objects of history and not the subject of history, when he was referring to Marx's work, right? And so this trend, since they're using words, is the same trend that we see here in this article, and that we continue to see. And it's also to reference what Matsemela said about the socialism conference. There's power in what African internationalism is, not because we idealistically like it, because it's rooted in historical materialism, that is rooted in facts, that it is grounded in the history and lives of people who are on the fire, and that we can better articulate it than someone who is writing a paper somewhere in Europe, in which, Vivek is basing his article on. And, he talks about, capitalism as emerging in Europe as a natural phenomenon. But it requires, capitalism as a world economy requires colonialism. It requires the theft of African people, our resources, our land, the domination of nations, of people, and also making them the subject of said, place. in order to extract their resources and enrich their coffers. And, you know, and the same can be said about this author. You know, it's a colonization of the subject of socialism. And yeah, so I'll leave it there. Like Comrade Matsemela say something.
Yeah, Uhuru, I appreciate. I mean, part of it is different answers to that. First one is they don't want this smoke, right? They acknowledge they don't want this smoke. So well, if you don't mention them, maybe this will just go over their heads. Because I mean, go back to 2022 socialism conference when Robin Kelly sat up there in front of their whole Black caucus and said, "Hey, you know, y'all need to pay attention to the APSP." You know, he told that, you know. And we with Robin Kelly, we work with Olufemi Taiwo and all these other people that hold up. But see, they want to hold up Africans that are our friends against us, and it's not going to work, right? So so I think that's so it's an old tactic. And then if they act like, so we got 50 plus years of continuous movement. Actually, they go back to the forming of the SNCC chapter. Talking about 60 years of the Uhuru movement, going back to 1966 and the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee. So I think what Yejide talked about is important as well. This question of making us subjects of the of history and not subjects of our own history. And to say that, you know, they're called Jacobin, right? Jacobin magazine. And so Jacobin takes its name from sort of the progressive segment of the French Revolution. There was this society of people in the French Revolution. I think they were set on Jacobin Street or something like that. I forget exactly how they get their name. But the logo they use is of Toussaint Louverture, which clearly means that sort of what they're trying to signal is C.L.R. James's book Black Jacobins, which is probably over your shoulder or something right there. It's Soliana if you want. C.L.R. James's book Black so I think it's not even I knew it. So it's not even a coincidence that they erased the black, which alludes to the French Revolution, but use the image which alludes to the Haitian Revolution. And even in that situation, trying to use African anti-colonial activity to forward sort of white social movements and things of that sort. So I think it's a clear attempt to erase our significance in bringing the question here. The other thing too is that, you know, being inside academia, you know, I'm a professor. You know, they can't contend with African internationalism, but they can't even contend with people like Cedric Robinson. So last year there was like a hit piece done against Cedric Robinson, and I know Cedric Robinson. There's some contention we have with certain conclusions. My main contention is that his ideas were created over 40 years ago. They were meant to move the needle forward, and a lot of academics, you know, opportunistically hinge on to ideas that he brought forward as if it's the end all be all, and they even twist his line, right? So he wasn't. So I'll say that, just say that there was something that came out against one by one of these white Marxists in attack Cedric Robinson last year. So it's very clear that sort of the colonial question has they can't contend with it. So the other thing I want to make is that I don't think it's a coincidence that they use a South Asian guy to attack the colonial question, but well, first off, they have to find a South Asian dude because they probably couldn't find a single African to do it. But the South Asian thing is so interesting because a South Asian, a guy by the name of M.N. Roy, who in like 1920 moves for the Communist International along the question of colonialism, and what's his name? Vladimir Lenin, allows for M.N. Roy to put out his own question on his own position on imperialism and colonialism and self-determination for colonized people, which rivaled even Lenin's, but Lenin understood himself that sort of like the agency of the colonized people. So that's why, to me, this position is like it wasn't even necessary, right? So bold and ridiculous about this. And these are the people that say they're fighting against fascist stuff, but it was Cole who said that if you want to defeat fascism, then you got to defeat colonialism. He says, I'm not convinced that defeating colonialism will defeat fascism, but if you defeat fascism, but if you defeat colonialism, you will surely defeat fascism. And that's absolutely correct, because guess what? Even after the Portuguese fascist rule over Portugal failed, right? Colonialism, Africans and Portuguese Africa still had to fight for their own freedom against a supposedly progressive or social. So that's a lot of stuff out there. Hopefully, but yeah, if you don't, they're hoping people don't the source. The thing I've learned from Chairman is that, look, social movement is like being a wave maker, right? And oftentimes people don't know the source of the wave, but they can feel the effects. But what they do is they start to try to find where's this come from, right? Well, if you say Chairman Omali Yeshitela, if you say African Internationalism, you say African People's Socialist Party, and around you asking these questions, they're going to know that they need to jump ship and come towards the source of that analysis. So I believe that it's an intentional trying to erase us, try to erase history, but you can't erase history, right? People are rising up. We're in the taking control of our own history. You can't erase it.
Yeah, you're exactly right. You can't erase us, and it's just showing just how you spoke there, that this is an attack there that we're seeing over and over, and this is an attack that I also want to see. Yejide, can you add to the discussion here? We mentioned that the writer here is actually a professor from New York University, I believe. There, we want to know: is it still an attack from the white left if the author is Indian?
Yes. Just like a black cop is a cop. You know what I mean? Like it's the white left ideology that they are understanding and trying to grapple with, and even though they don't need to grapple with, based on what Matsemela was saying. And I think that I don't know who mentioned Stuttgart, the second Communist International convention that they had in 1907, and I was reading a document put forward by the chairman that actually has quotes from these so-called socialists, well, white left socialists difference, and what they were saying in terms of maintaining colonialism. They were like, no, we don't want to get rid of colonialism in the colonies. We can be the we can use colonialism for good. And if it wasn't, it's just that colonialism was being used for bad, and we can use the colonialism for good so that we can administer it, because the savages, this is a word that they use, the savages in the colonies, they didn't know what to do with machines. I am acting it out, but these are actual words that these people have said. They didn't know what to do with. What would happen if we put our machines out on the ground? Would we leave it to the savages? Would they eat us? These are all things that socialists, people who have agreed and united with the premise that capitalism is extractive and it should not be something that we maintain. But in order to get rid of capitalism, you can't really get rid of capitalism. They want to maintain capitalism in a socialist, what do you call it, case. And I think what we're seeing with this article and this attack that continues, not just in this instance, but continues ongoing, is a waging academic attack mostly around the question of colonialism as a mode of production. It is trying to wrestle away from the people who are experiencing the analysis that comes as a result of that. And and there are some Negroes that fall into that. There are some South Asians that fall into that. There are some other kinds of colonized people who fall into this understanding, and that I've had to talk to too, people who belong to these organizations who essentially say that, yeah, capitalism was a natural progression and from Marx. And I actually had to go to one of these events where I was speaking of, and somebody said that in the audience, and I was like, no. Capitalism, colonialism is the basis for the oppression of African people. We are living as domestically colonized individuals in this country, and African people are still suffering from colonialism. It's not something of the past, it's something that currently happens. And when you look at the components of colonialism, all the tenets of what it is happening to African people. And I think that this podcast, in addition to, I don't know, I hadn't seen anything on social media about it. I wasn't looking for it, honestly, but I didn't see any discourse, and I'd be interested to see what people were saying in the comments as well. But I think we cannot allow for white left socialists to declare for us and for the world what is and what is not important, and to dismiss, analysis and clear historical materialist analysis, using the same thing that they should be using to make claims around things like what is happening to the world, and in particular what's happening to colonized people.
Uhuru, yeah, thank you so much for that answer, Comrade Yejide. And just to answer your question really quickly, they actually did, they posted this article on their Twitter account. And if you go there, if you go to the tweet I sent it to you, you see all these quote tweets and replies. Really, people are against this position. People are not a fan of this take. They come for Jacobin, they criticize Jacobin. You see in the quote tweets that people are actually quoting that quote that Chairman uses from Marx. It talks about how, the rosy dawn of capitalism started from the commercial hunting of Black. You see that quote, and that quote was what Chairman really pulled out in his analysis to make this really important argument about where capitalism comes from, right? And showing, even in Marx's own admission, that he was able to identify that, but where he fails and where he is wrong is that he still thinks that the revolutionary subject that is then the key to resolving capitalism is the white workers of Europe, right? To make that leap because of his own social position, and that's what Sherman really attacks in African internationalism and criticizes it, and what makes African internationalism really. But you see that people, using that quote, right? And just to add, in recent years, right, the Democratic Socialists of America in St. Petersburg, Florida, had actually refused to endorse our party-run candidates, right, who were running on a reparations and anti-gentrification platform because they accused of being Black nationalists, right? This is very telling on their part. They couldn't even come behind and support the question of reparations and anti-gentrification, right? So they
say that they keep giving us receipts. They keep giving us receipts to justify what we are saying. But go ahead, Carmen. I'm sorry.
No, you're absolutely right. They are, and I'll list some of them. Right, they endorsed the status quo Democrats, right? And in 2023, the Party for Socialism and Liberation, liberation from what and who was being liberated? ? Right, but PSL, who's led by a white man named Brian Becker, actually organized a contending demonstration to the annual Black People's March on the White House that was held by the Black Coalition, right? And at the time, the party was under active assault by the U.S. government with the case of the Uhuru 3. And this mobilization was really important, and it was a really major pull together of forces to oppose the U.S. government's attack on the Black liberation movement. And, PSL promoted their march under the guise of standing with Palestine, but, this was really an attempt to drive a wedge between Africans and Palestinians. Rather than joining, our march, they used their massively funded operations, but, to counter-organize, which was in direct opposition to the anti-colonial struggle, of which Palestine is included, and of which was the major organizing theme for us at the time, still is, but, we really can put it out there in the wake of the FBI attack on our movement. They couldn't oppose the genocide of Africans. Instead, they had to, perform solidarity for Palestine, again, without doing nothing material about the slaughter of Palestinians, right? And now to add, we see DSA-backed NYC Mayor Zoran Mamdani being championed as the socialist savior, when again, in reality, we see, like you said, Yejide, receipts, right? Where he's refusing to meet with local African anti-colonial organizers around gentrification and affordable housing. And again, just showing you, like, even in addition to what they're saying, what they're doing also reveals where they really stand. And it's not revolution, it's reform.
Wow. Yeah. And just looking here. Go ahead.
I was looking at the website of the articles on, and the side is some articles, and it says what so I haven't read it. I just look at the title. What Zoran can learn from sewer socialists. I guess it's another iteration of socialism that they continue to come popping up. Socialism is socialism, y'all. It's socialism. It's the rearranging society so that African people, that those who are oppressed have control of the resources and can arrange society so that it benefits most of the people. You cannot do that underneath capitalism, as we pointed out with Bernie Sanders, who also ran on saying that he was a democratic socialist, and you see now Zoran, who won. And this idea that and I think that this is a continued idea that they continue to talk about socialism within the context of colonialism, and never really forwarding us to a place where we can actually, we are African Internationalists have forwarded us to that place, but the socialists who claim and try to dominate the discussion don't have a to what end. They're just going to continue to live on the hamster wheel of capitalism and then criticize it, and then call themselves from democratic socialism and try to put forward some sort of programs or just some narrative about being for the people. But in reality, a true socialist is about the destruction of capitalism. It's about the overturning of the social system so that we can get control, so the people can have control over the means of production, and for us as African people having control and ownership over our means of production, so that we can right the world, you know what I'm saying, right ourselves, but also in doing so right the world. And these are not real socialists, if you want to make claims.
Yeah, you're exactly right. And let's talk about that. And I wanted to highlight one of our viewers here in the chat. They wrote that they skipped the evolution capitalism out of mercantilism during the colonial period, which Chairman has been pointing out for decades. And that's something that I do want to let's turn the discussion to the Chairman, and let's talk about that for a moment here, where Chairman Omali's conclusion that we live under a global colonial mode of production. And that's something that he said over and over in his teachings, and that the road to true socialism is painted black. And in the political report to the 2022 plenary, he actually writes a section titled, "White Workers and Leftists Gaily Share the Feast of Colonial Roots." And in that section, he quotes these excerpts of arguments by our supporters of the majority position at the Second Communist International, held in Stuttgart, Germany, it is, in 1907. And these arguments, y'all, you would have thought it was Trump himself espousing his white nationalist vitriol. But it was, in fact, the astute socialists out of Europe that was saying all this, and the ideological forefathers of the DSA and the white left.
Yeah, that's absolutely right. And both of you, Yejide and Matsemela, have touched on this, but just to give one example, this is someone from Netherlands. His name is Hendrik van Kool, and he articulated the sort of majority position of the Second International, right? So he says, quote, "The minority resolution also denies that the productive forces of the colonies can be developed through the capitalist colonial policy. I do not understand at all how a thinking person can say that. Simply consider the colonization of the United States of North America. Without it, the native peoples there would today be living in the most backward social conditions. This is exactly what you were talking about, Comrade Yejide. He asks, does Ledebor want to take away the raw materials indispensable for modern society, which the colonies can offer? Does he want to give up the vast resources of the colonies, even if only for the present? Do those German, French, and Polish delegates who signed the minority resolution want to accept the responsibility for simply abolishing the present colonial system? Again, they want this system, they need the system for the current system, right? They recognize it and say that they don't want to get rid of it. He says, as long as humanity has existed, there have been colonies, and I think that they will exist for a long time yet. Surely there are few socialists who think that colonies will be unnecessary in the future social order. Although we do not need to discuss this question today, I still ask Ledebor, does he have the courage now, under capitalism, to give up the colonies? Perhaps he can also tell us what he would do about the overpopulation of Europe. Where would the people who must emigrate go if not to the colonies? And does he, as a social democrat, want to shirk his duty to work continually for the education and further advancement of the backward peoples? Especially for Germany's sake, I regret that the social democracy there has limited itself to questioning the need for colonies and the benefits they bring. You saw in the last election campaign how the masses were hypnotized by the thought of the benefits to be gained from the colonies, not only the petty bourgeoisie, but also the industrial workers. Again, and this is the end of the quote, we've talked about this. You've specifically mentioned how they saw colonialism bringing the process of development to these backward people, right? These quote unquote savages, and how it's not only a necessary thing for capitalism, but how Europe needs it, right? And being socialist doesn't necessarily mean opposing it. This is them articulating that. But is there anything more either of you, wish to add on this front, like, and how this sort of connects to what we're seeing with this article today? Either of you.
Well, yeah, I mean,
go ahead, Matsemela.
Well, yeah, I mean, we talked about it. There was a guy, going back to the last question about whether the guy being South Asian changes anything. There's a person who many Africans, especially Black nationalists, uphold, is a guy by the name of George Padmore. And George Padmore, early 1930s, I think it was, wrote a book called The Life and Struggles of Negro Toilers. And in that, even though he talked about oppression of African people, he used words of like African people being backwards and essentially needing white workers to come in and save us and bring us into modernity. And that's George Padmore from Trinidad, went to school with C.L.R. James. So the point here is, like Yejide says, we talking about a black cop is still a cop. That's really the sort of materialist position. But going even deeper than that, so I think just sort of ideologically, that's one aspect, right? You get this idea that sort of what Padmore and all them was working through is that white workers were workers and Africans weren't even workers, right? We were slaves and property and things like that, but we weren't workers. And when we were sort of primitive worker, not yet sort of them. But so it's important to note, because like I said, this is really a reactionary position that this guy put out. Definition of reactionary is to go backwards, right? And this guy is in this article opening up a position that have been resolved even by this. I mean, I think like you can see even the response, like you said, on social media to his position, like wow, this is literally the definition of a backwards position, and things of that sort. So, but it's not a coincidence, right? It's not a coincidence. I'd be interested in finding this guy's position on other sort of internal questions inside his own home country of India. So yeah, I mean, I would just say that it's by extension the same position, one which sort of Africa as the past, and Africa's backwards, Europe and whiteness as modern and something to be a strive to be replicated. But yeah, I mean, there's more to that, but it really, as soon as I read the article, I felt it was more of the same. And like I said, really the definition of what reactionary means. Reactionary means to go backwards, right? And this really the essence of that. Yeshide?
Thank you, Matsemela, Dr. Matsemela Odom. I did look up on the website what other articles he did write, and they read like rage baiting on social media. Colonialism, plunder didn't create capitalism. Power, not economic theory, created neoliberalism. Revolutionary roots of democracy. And I don't see anything about India though, but okay. And I just think that we have a great advantage as African people in this moment. And for the last 60 years, the chairman, Omali Yeshitela, and his deep critical analysis and using the genius of African historians and people, and just even the European ones, to make the historical materialist conclusion that has developed into African internationalism. And I really appreciate that as an African person who, we haven't been trained regularly, like mass, the general population of Black people are not trained to like use a historical analysis. It's always this thing about why me, why Black people, and things like that. And I'm just like, well, we don't have to ask that question. The question has been answered, through the African internationalism for an African person. It can also be answered for other colonized people as well. And I really appreciate, because we don't dig back to the Second Internationalist Communist Convention. We don't look at those documents. We don't look at what people say or do. And history has a way of repeats itself all the time. So as a poor working class organization, I think it's really important that, the leading thinkers, that chairman pulls out the leading thinkers or the leading socialist minds of that, lay the foundation for the white left, what they are saying about African people. And that's why we can't take anything that they say with a grain of salt, because this is their history. Our history, on the other hand, is one rooted in the reality of the world, not like we want it to be, but based on what actually is. And I'm going to reference back to what Matsemela said about, Amilcar Cabral said, if you want to end fascism, you need to, destroy colonialism. And, and I also would say it's really important too, because when we talk about capital, like, socialism and, socialism in Europe, and how, certain European countries are socialist on top of the pedestal of capitalism, which is kind of interesting. They always talk about like the workers in the country. We need to have, workers of the world unite. And I don't know, I'm sure the chairman provided this example, but like, would the workers of the world unite, organize, and a contingent to go to South Africa and stand with miners in South Africa who are struggling for a better pay? No, because you need the resources out of that mine in order for you to maintain a job in Europe. And so this is where we see this extraction that continues to happen, and the basis for socialism, the white left socialism, that we are seeing in these articles, and with the character of its movement that are led by organizations like DSA and PSL, is that it's a pedestal upon which they can, could further extract and maintain themselves.
Right. There was a guy, and I generally like him. His name was James Connolly. He was or like headed I think it was called the Irish Socialist Republican Party or something like that at that time. Not the group that we made contact with in the 80s, but sort of a precursor to that group. And even he and others at that time saw the darn Boers in South Africa as a progressive force, because they were characterized as workers fighting against England, which was seen as the imperial power. So they're saying, okay, we got a problem with England. They got a problem with England. This must be a progressive thing, which shows the need for African internationalism and the centering of the self activity of African people, and that's important. And the one thing I want to said by the difference in going back, so we see this struggle being waged against us and what the parties and chairman have identified as ideological imperialists. We've seen this struggle between Africans and ideological imperialists going back a long time, even back to the revolution in Haiti in the late 1700s, early 1800s, with white left people like Sonthonax and things like that that came in and try to take control of the revolution there. But what we have is we got that anti-colonial struggle underneath the leadership of a revolutionary party of the African working class, and that's why they wouldn't say our name. That's why they wouldn't identify us and things of that sort. That's why, they want to make it to seem like this is just some academic discussion and not a force of political reaction and things of that sort. So that's really the difference. Now is sort of an organized theory, revolutionary party of the African working class that represents that long tendency of African anti-colonial struggle and things of that sort. So, yeah, this was an important conversation to have.
Yeah, definitely important conversation. As always, both of you are a friend of the show, and we could continue this discussion on, and definitely want to get back. And we, just as you mentioned, we know that the way forward has already been established, and that's what the chairman, Omali Yeshitela, has already defined, and African People's Socialist Party there. And the party opened this whole door for this whole principal participation in the form of USM, and we have the APSC, and this has really threatened the white left's trajectory when it comes to their whole socialist colonialism there. So the party makes that definition and defines this question of white solidarity when it comes to this. It is a position that the white left, they disagree with, y'all, and it doesn't accept African working class as this just leadership, and it wants to obtain the rights and freedom on top of the colonial pedestal, that same pedestal, but we're kicking that pedestal right from under them, y'all, and right from under their feet. And we want to thank you both so much. Thank you, President Yejide, and thank you, Director Matsemela, for joining One Africa Worldview today for this discussion. And this is our season finale, y'all. It's always been a pleasure to have you on the show. Thank you so much. Uhuru.
Thank you for having me.
Uhuru, happy to be here.
Right on. Yes. Thank you again, comrades, for joining us. And we will see you back on in future episodes because, again, they were spin hot fire analysis, right? But, now we have to go ahead and move to the end here, of our season 3 finale. We're going to leave you with announcements on how the party is moving forward and making it possible for people to join, volunteer, support, and participate. And just based on everything that we've talked about in this episode, it becomes even more and more incumbent on us to get actively involved, right? So here is what's coming up. So the Uhuru 3 APSP chairman Omali Yeshitela and Uhuru movement leaders Penny Hess and Jesse Neville, along with a special panel of anti-imperialist leaders and scholars, will be speaking out on Saturday, January 17 at 2 p.m. Eastern Time at 3 p.m. Caracas time in an urgent webinar hosted by the Hands Off Uhuru Counteroffensive in response to the brutal U.S. bombings and attack on people of Venezuela and the kidnapping and arrest of President Nicolas Maduro and first combatant Celia Flores in violation of international law. The 2022 political attack on Chairman Omali Yeshitela and the Uhuru movement proved to be a harbinger for this period when the rights and sovereignty of colonized peoples inside the U.S. and around the world are under assault by the colonial powers. So this call to action joins other actions that are, recognizing this brutal attack on anti-colonial free speech and self-determination. We say victory to Venezuela and victory to African and indigenous people here and around the world. And when we fight, we win. So you could register for this really amazing webinar at handsoffuhuru.org/register. And on Monday, January 19th at 10 a.m. Central, 11 a.m. Eastern, I believe, join the Black Power Blueprint as they honor Dr. Martin Luther King Jr.'s legacy, along with all courageous African leaders who have fought for African community self-determination and self-reliance. This dynamic program includes historic film clips, delicious treats by our own Uhuru Bakery and Cafe, and an overview of the volunteer opportunities in our community that build Black power in our own hands in person at the Uhuru House. And this is at 4101 West Florissant Avenue, St. Louis, as well as online. And the event features a keynote presentation by Chairman Omali Yeshitela, who is the living legacy of the Black Power movement. So go ahead and reserve your spot today at tinyurl.com/STLMLK Day. STLMLK Day. So for more info about this, you can email volunteer@blackpowerblueprint.org, or you can call 314-380-8016. And of course, this is your reminder to go ahead and start planning. And we've mentioned this event all throughout our last few episodes. The event of the year is coming. The African People's Socialist Party's International Plenary takes place on April 17th and 19th in St. Louis, Missouri. And the theme is "This time till it's won, power in our own hands." It's not just Trump, it's the whole damn system. So if you're ready to get organized, to build and fight back, this is where you definitely have to be. So go ahead and start planning your travel arrangements now. I went ahead and registered, so you can go ahead and register at apspplenary.org. And of course, for all of our other events and everything else going on, please be sure to visit theburningspear.com/events, and we'll be keeping you updated here on One Africa Worldview. So make sure you subscribe on any of the socials and make sure that you're locked in and following there. And we'll be back in a few weeks for season 4.
Yeah, that's it. You heard her. Want to thank you once again to all of our viewers, y'all, all our supporters and listeners. Season 3 complete here. 3 seasons that you have followed us here. 3 seasons with your support that we are so appreciative of. Thank you so much. And want to make sure that you grab your very own January 26th issue of the Burning Spear newspaper. And don't forget to subscribe to our channels to never miss an episode of One Africa Worldview podcast, y'all, when we return for season 4. So we stream on the Burning Spear TV YouTube channel, on the Burning Spear Media Rumble channels, on Black Power 96.3 FM radio based in St. Petersburg, Florida, and streaming globally, worldwide on the Black Power 96.3 FM app. So until next time, y'all, One Africa,
One nation.
One nation.
For